Aloha, amigos. I am writing you today from beautiful Connecticut, where it is 83 degrees at 9:06 p.m. And it feels 100% like Hawaii. We are 80% humidity up in this bitch. My hair's doing this thing where it's standing up on its own. It is toasty. On tonight's episode, we're going to talk about the benefits of bananas. Potassium, pretty good for you. Not too much, though. Too much potassium, bad. Too much of anything is bad, except for cars. Actually, no, too much of cars is definitely bad, too. Was thinking that I was going to come back out here and do some more floor stuff tonight, but really don't feel like it. I think I'm going to skip around a little bit. Conclusion of floors will come next. I just need a break from doing them. Really tired. Really tired of the dumb floors. So, gonna take a mental break. Some other housekeeping information. Was driving the Exocet the other day. T-boned a lady. Not cool. Turns out that opening her garage was more important than actually looking at oncoming traffic. I believe her words to me were, I didn't even see you. And then she responded with, why were you going so fast? And if you didn't see me, then how did you know I was going fast? I actually was doing the speed limit, and luckily for me, the brakes on this thing are pretty sweet. Also, luckily for me, thank you, Connecticut. I guess I understand the law now. Connecticut makes you put a bumper on cars that don't have a low impact bumper. So you can see on the nose here, I have these two studs that stick out. Up there, hanging on a hook, is a bumper that actually slides into here and locks into place with PTO pins, believe it or not. It looks awful, but it passed inspection, and the second I passed inspection, I took it off. Luckily for me, one of those, this guy right here, actually, you actually see the little paint chip there, hit her wheel, her nice Mercedes E-Class wheel, cracked it, cracked the spoke. That's a doozy. The other one punched right through her door. So that's cool. Relatively unscathed, no damage to the Exocet. Minus an exhaust hanger broke from the impact, which was like literally 7 miles an hour by the time it happened. That being said, if it broke from that impact, it was likely to break down the road. So at some point, I am going to have to remake part of the rear exhaust. The exhaust always enters the rear, or always exits the rear, I should say. But this is the muffler assembly on here, and this guy just decided that it no longer wanted to be attached to itself. So we're running straight pipes right now, boys. It actually sounds pretty decent right now. As you can see, it's hanging quite a bit low because there's not much hanging on right now, but it was pretty wedged up. So I need to fix it. Got blinking lights now. I'm thinking about actually making another exhaust that I can swap on and off. This guy is great, sounds quiet, it's nice for cruising. It sounds like it should with the straight pipe right now, so I think I'm gonna whip up another U section and just to cut tips so that I can actually extend the exhaust past the rear of the car, get out of the low pressure area that's created by car driving down the road and recirculating exhaust fumes back into it. Kind of angle it back outwards, and so I'll ultimately end up doing that at some point. But aside from that, I'm fine. Thanks for asking. Even if you didn't, I'm gonna tell you I'm good. Low impact, was wearing my helmet, a little bit of bruising in the shoulders, but 5-7 miles an hour wasn't worse than running a go-kart into a tire wall at your local go-kart place. That being said, we are back on the Z tonight. I mentioned in the beginning that I was gonna do floors, but I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna do something else. Almost everything has showed up. The wrong clutch showed up. They sent me a clutch for a V6 Camaro, which is not cool. Also still arguing with the people that made the floor pan. So I will post deets about that when I get some answers back from them. I think tonight we're gonna do a little bit of work on the exhaust for a couple of reasons. There's something new on this. This nice hood. Let's take a second because I forgot about this. I didn't forget about it. I did forget about it. This hood right here. Found it locally. A guy listed his 280 up for sale and had some really nice headlight covers on it. And I messaged him and asked him if they were OEM or if they were repops, because I'd never seen repops that looked like that. I don't think he actually was sure. But I asked if he had any other parts kicking around or something like that. He asked me, I don't remember how it happened. Anyways, long story short, found out that he had this hood that he picked up for a different car, and ultimately wasn't going to use it, and said, if you want it, take it, $50. The hood itself is actually in phenomenal shape. It's got really fresh paint on it, white, albeit, but no rust whatsoever. The cowl is actually the factory cowl, just extended up 2 to 3 inches or so. I would guess it's probably 3 inches. I mean, you could see the factory bulge. If I move all of my crap that's on top of it, you'd see the factory bulge, and whoever did it did a fantastic job with the fab work. They literally just cut down the side here, raised up the center section, added in some splice panels, filled it all, smoothed it all down, added these louver plates, which I definitely was going to add louvers regardless of which hood that I ran, because I don't trust the design of this engine bay to handle the amount of heat that a 4.8 liter engine is going to put off, and I like things running cool, because lean is mean and cool is cool. Anyways, back to the hood. Long story short, he has 2 other Zs. He has a 73 rolling shell and a 71. Late 71, it was a 1070. Or 1070? I think it was 1070. Maybe it was 1071. Anyways, it's car number like 15,000. But a friend of mine that I mentioned back last video, a guy named Mark, who is probably going to end up painting this car, has been looking for a Z, it turns out. So I met Mark up there, and that Series 1 is currently sitting on my trailer. I need to get it down to Mark's house, but it's obviously super dark out and can't really tell you about the car, so I'm going to do that when it's light out. Really quick, this is going to be spliced into the middle of something else. I mentioned that we had found another Series 1. This particular Series 1 is going to my buddy Mark, who I mentioned is most likely going to paint my 248Z. This car was originally gold, and Mark will most likely end up making it that way again. It's actually a very complete car, fairly good shape, a couple of broken pieces here and there, a tree's in the way. Pears, if anyone likes pears. Got some good ones growing right now. Super complete car. This car is car number 15586, I believe. Ooh, 12253. It's a good thing that I looked, because I have apparently a horrible memory. Tire interior, extra grille, front bumpers, we got fenders, we got all sorts of stuff. We have an uncracked Series 1 dash. No cracks whatsoever. And 35,000 showing on the odometer. And typical doors that don't close. But again, car's in really good shape, rust-wise and everything else. We're gonna go make a delivery. Anyways, this hood came from there, and it's in pretty good shape. Haven't decided if I like it yet. In pictures, the cowl did not look nearly as large as it does now. Kind of has a little bit of like a 1984 Camaro thing going on. It gives me all the space in the world to run whatever intake I want, which is cool. So the coolest part of this is that I now have 2 hoods. So if I can make the factory hood work, great. If not, I've got a hood that I think will fit the aesthetic of, 265 tires and loud, fast stuff. So either way, we've got some options now, and options are cool. Not as cool as this shirt, but they're still pretty cool. So anyways, we're going to get going on working on a little bit of the exhaust stuff. So I mentioned that I want to get the exhaust stuff fabricated before I pull the engine out. We're gonna go from there. I'm gonna take the shirt off because it's way too cool to do exhaust fabrication in, and get going. Aloha, because that also means hi and goodbye, I think. All right, quick update as to where we are. Yes, I was smacking the hell out of those things with a hammer. If you've never hit something with a hammer, it is very stress relieving. Also, sometimes you just have to hit shit with a hammer, especially when it is a $38 Chinese eBay hugger header. So my game plan with these was I bought them expecting them to fit like crap and having to modify them, and my expectations were pretty right. They're advertised as a hugger header. The only thing that they really hug is the spark plugs. Yeah, they do a really good job of hugging the spark plugs and kind of getting closer to the block. So as you can see right here, great clearance. Lots of space for a boot. No. Nope. Literally goes right over the top of it. Acceptable, probably with the heat shield. Mediocre at best. Yeah, you know what? There's a decent amount of space there. This guy though, fine. This guy, not so much. So that sucks. And moving on over to this side. Similar problems. I guess you're just supposed to melt all of your spark plug boots with these headers. Good news is that even with a factory size starter in there, there is plenty of room with the downturn on this side with the hugger headers on this side to make everything jive. And I mean everything. So had to bend the brake line out of the way a little bit down here. I don't know if you can actually see that. Not necessarily. Had to bend the brake line out of the way down here just to create like a 3/16 air gap. I'll probably end up rerouting the brake line because there's plenty of space on top of the frame rail, and anything that I can do to get it out of that high heat area is going to be beneficial. I've seen a lot of reviews of like the CX Racing and Jags That Run headers and all that kind of stuff, and there is not enough room for a header there. And if there is room for absolutely nothing else. Probably could make it happen with like a 2-inch pipe and like the world's most precise fabrication, but I measured that gap and that is like 2 1/4. So that's cool. We are definitely going to go down, and then we're going to make a 90 kind of right underneath the starter there, and then go down that way into the trans tunnel. This side, me smacking the shit out of it with a hammer was just to see if once I realized that it was not going to jive with the spark plug as is. I wanted to see what it would take to make it fit on the steering shaft, and I believe that it's fitting now with like probably close to a 1/8 inch air gap, which is fine for my liking. I'm thinking that if I put 1/2-inch spacers in under the motor mounts between the actual frame section and the motor mount that I made, things will start to jive a little bit better, particularly with the steering shaft. I'll have to do a little bit of math. I might have to put a 1/2-inch spacer on the transmission as well. We'll see where that puts our angles for those universal joints that we talked about earlier in the series. One of the things that I preemptively did is I talked about 1 5/8 primary headers being the ideal flow. The ones that I ordered are actually 1 3/4. So we have a little bit of leeway if I want to mangle, because that's what it's going to be, mangle one of those primary tubes a little bit. We're not going to totally restrict flow. It's obviously not going to be super ideal. We're not going to squeeze every single horsepower out of this thing with a slightly dented tube, but denting header tubes to fit spark plug boots is something that every Chevy 350 owner that has done any sort of performance upgrades has done at one point in their life. I think that's about it. I think we're going to get back to a little bit of fabrication. At the very least, what I can do, listen, I paid $77 for this set of headers, okay? Primarily after a few things. If you buy just the machined flanges for the headers, the 3-bolt collector flanges, and a little bit of tube, you're at like $100 if you buy raw materials. So already I'm ahead. They came with all the hardware to mount them, so I have all the hardware. So in the flanges and the hardware alone is probably worth that $77 if I was to buy that stuff new. So I bought these with the intention of, if they fit, great. If I can make them fit, better. Worst case scenario, I have to lop them all off at the flanges and build my own headers. And that's something that I've done before, and it's not something that I'm scared of doing. And that was kind of plan C on this. So we'll see if we can avoid that. We'll see if we can get to plan B and find a middle ground between, off-the-shelf component and completely custom. We're gonna dive right back to it after I drink water, because it is really disgusting in here. It is really gross right now. Tree frogs are going nuts. It is 9:51. And it is still a disgusting New England day, and it's only June. I'm gonna have to break out the Daisy Dukes. Back to it. I lied. One more thing that I want to tell you guys before I get back to this. I talked about how we were gonna fabricate the exhaust in this car a couple of videos back, and in that I mentioned that we were gonna do it with a combination of mandrel bends and pie cuts. There is a process to mandrel bend pipe at home with a couple of relatively inexpensive tools. That I will cover at some point. I also found a company called Ego Bike that makes exhaust tube. It's kind of like a florist selling cheeseburgers, but anyways, so they make exhaust tube kits, which is like, everyone has done that. Speedway has done that, Jegs has done that till the end of time. But some really nice mandrel bend tubes, and I picked up a box of all of that for the whopping sum of $95, including 4 4-foot straight sections that are in that box right there. And quality's pretty good. It's pretty thick walled exhaust pipe there. The bends are super smooth. There's no kinking through them. It's gonna make my life a lot easier, but we have an amalgamation of 45s, 180s. We got a couple 90s in here. Got a couple big 90s. Got a couple small 90s. So we're gonna do a combination of cutting those to fit, as well as pie cutting our own where we need to make smaller, very intricate cuts. And I will go over that as I get to them. Cool. Status report. Battery died. Check the clock. It is 11 o'clock. It is time for me to call it for tonight. Made pretty good progress though. I'm definitely going to be able to salvage these manifolds. Some slight modifications, a little bit of squaring where they should have been round. Gonna have to figure out something with the spark plug tubes, but if I have to cut it and add a little jog to it, then so be it. That's easy enough to do. Got the exhaust all the way to the end of the transmission-ish. Now I get to debate whether or not I want to put inline resonators in it. The answer is probably yes, because mufflers without resonators kind of sound like garbage. And I want something that's a little bit more smooth and a little less Kyle in his black Silverado with monster stickers. So I'll show you what I did real quick. Everything's tacked up. I'm also out of argon. And if I'm not out, then the gauge is on 0, so I'm going to run out soon. So definitely a good place to cut it. Part 2 of this is going to be just buttoning it up, adding some hangers. Routing is working out really well. Let's go over what I did. So starting up here, you can see the clearance to the steering column there. There's a slight gap there. I'm gonna have to manipulate that a little bit. What I might actually do is cut out a notch and throw a scallop plate in the side of the collector there. Again, I'm not overly concerned about flow. I mean, Hugger shorty headers don't exactly flow the best to begin with. They flow better than the factory manifolds, the log style manifolds. So we're still moving in the right direction, but you know, not super high performance. Again, once I add those spacers in there, it should give me the exact clearance that I need. Passenger side, not really the same story. We've got just about a 3/16 air gap between the edge of the collector and the frame rail. Frame rail is metal. Don't care that it gets hot. Worst case scenario, it makes the paint look a little bit faded, but it is what it be sometimes. So this is going to sound a little bit counterintuitive, but bear with me, and if you think my logic is dumb, then so be it. When I modify a car, when I put an exhaust on it, I tend to like to have the exhaust be the lowest physical point in the car for a couple of reasons. Exhaust pipe, super cheap. I mean, this, you know, like a 4-foot stick, you go to Napa, it's like $12 or something like that, right? So in the event that the high center, that I get stuck on something, that I scrape and drag, it's on an easily replaceable section of exhaust pipe, and not something like the frame, the oil pan, anything that's more expensive or could potentially cause the vehicle to be disabled or damage that could lead to, you know, other failures down the road. That being said, there's honestly not a lot of room for this to go, so it just ended up working out this way. So here we go. So from the driver's side on down, you can see where I've got this, I've got steering shaft issues, and this is the same thing. So again, I keep talking about those spacers. If I add those spacers, it's going to drop it right into this area right here, which I already cut and pushed in a little bit. You saw me cut the flange off because the flange initially ended right at where the end of the collector was, and that was obviously in the way of the shaft. So by dropping it down 2¼ inches, it allows access to it while not sitting on the bend. This transition, this is supposed to be a 2.5-inch collector, and it's actually a 2.5-inch ID. And then this pipe is stepped down to 2¼ inches, or it's actually like 2 3/8, which is interesting. So this angle, it's like a 6-degree cut here, 6 degree on each, so it's 12 degrees. 12-degree cut here will be fully formed out, but this is a 2.5-inch ID pipe to a 2 3/8 ID pipe. So there's a small gap that I'm gonna have to fill. Really no issues. On the passenger side, similar story, 2 6-degree pie cuts. If you're not cutting your pie cuts with a miter saw, I highly recommend it. Makes life super easy. So this is with a full-sized LS truck starter, or Gen 3 small block starter, I should say. And forgive the oil, it's because I didn't fully drain the motor and there's no gasket in there, so It's all just residual leaking out. But so what I wanted to do is I wanted to make this fit with a full-size starter. And you can see it's tucked in there. There's a just about an 1.25 inch gap to the back of the starter motor itself. And then all along the bottom, there's plenty of space. There's enough space to get the level connector on. And then I believe the dipstick tube, dipstick tube goes in right here, and there's enough space to get that in as well. When I took on the passenger side, I wanted to make sure that there was enough space to fit a full-size starter in there for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of the mini starters are not the same size. So mini to one company is not the same dimensions, mini to another company. That being said, they're all probably made in the same 3 factories in China, so I'm not really sure why that is, but what I wanted to do is have the ability to maintain a factory starter. So in the event in 3 or 4 years from now, if the starter ever failed due to heat or whatever, there's just starters that fail, you could easily replace it with a factory unit instead of having to try and hunt down a mini starter that could potentially be the wrong size. What this also opens the door for us to do is to run a mini starter and have just additional clearance to everything, which is ideal. More clearance, more better. Moving down along the transmission tunnel, you can see the floors that I am still not doing. I'm not talking about them right now. This is good right here. This is just how it's supposed to be, right from the factory. Thank you for that company that I'm still arguing with. There's no room. So now that I'm under here and I'm looking at it, the CX Racing headers, they dump out like right here, which is great. And then you end up with basically the same thing that I ran into. So instead of going down the back of the firewall, I just came down the side of the motor, and then I'm running along the oil pan and down that way. Because I'm using the factory transmission mount, I have a little bit of less space than some other of the LS swaps that I've seen. But as it sits right now, the pipes are just over 7/8 of an inch below the bottom of the frame rail. Keep in mind that I'm going to be adding those heavy-duty frame rails to this car as well. So the gap differential between the bottom of the exhaust pipe and the bottom of the frame rail should be somewhere around 1/2 inch. Which is pretty comfortable, which I'm pretty comfortable with. Let's move on down. Come on down. $1, Bob. To the back here, excuse the gaps that I still need to close that I talked about a cajillion times. Well, here, I can actually show you now that I'm underneath here. So this is the gap that I'm talking about that I need to close between the two. So all it involves is throwing a bunch of seam sealer in there, flattening it against it, which it's easy to do with more than 2 fingers of force, and then stitch welding it along the bottom, and that'll give that super strong seal on the floors that I keep reiterating every time I talk about floors. Some other cool news that I discovered: factory drive shaft is almost the exact right length for where I ended up with my transmission mount, which is pretty super cool. So just gonna, I might honestly be able to get away with putting in the appropriate U-joint and slip yoke on that. Might not have to modify the drive shaft at all, which would be, that would be wild, honestly. I don't think it's gonna happen, but if we can find a U-joint that has a Datsun end, or two Datsun nubs and 2 Chevy nubs, then we're probably in business. Anyways. Probably going to add exhaust hangers to the transmission mount. It's the logical place to add them in supporting down here. You can see that they're just propped up on this piece of 1x1 right now. Plenty of space to everything. I like to leave at least a 5/8 air gap between the OD of the exhaust pipe and any of the body panels, and what that allows for with exhaust hangers with rubber or poly exhaust hangers is a little bit of compliance, so that as things shake and vibrate, it's not banging off the tunnel. There's nothing worse than exhaust rattles. It'll drive you bananas, particularly RPM specific exhaust rattles. So I mentioned that fuel cell, and that's relevant for the remainder of the exhaust for what we're gonna do. You can kind of see there's actually, in the old mustache bar here, actually 2 nice little little dimple guys anyways. And that's kind of what I'm targeting. So they're narrowing in here. I'm gonna kick them back out. So I'll end up coming out here underneath the subframe. And then ye old gas tank is gonna go bye-bye. Pretty sure that it's not in great shape because that looks like it's fuel leaking through it. So happy I made a decision to go with the fuel cell. And then muffler is gonna live here. Another muffler is gonna live there. I believe that I'm gonna add the resonators. Probably end up using like a vibrant resonator or something right in here in the nice straight section. But it's overall, it's actually going to be one of the easiest overall, it's actually going to be one of the easiest exhausts that I've ever made. I honestly was super surprised. It's almost like these cars were meant to have V8s in them, and then at the last minute, Japanese were like, straight six is way more refined and much cooler, which it is. But thank you to the Japanese gentleman who I can't remember that was the lead design engineer for the 240Z platform for making them the way that they are. That's about all I have for you tonight. Check in next time for the culmination of the exhaust, I guess, and then we'll get back to floors. Like I said, I want to get the exhaust buttoned up, and then all of that and the motor and trans are going to come out because I need to do at the very minimum head gaskets on the motor now that I found Sir Fuzzy's favorite hideaway in there. Want to get the fuel system run. That's easier to do with the motor and transmission out of the way because I want to hide the fuel lines up in the transmission tunnel. And then once that's done and the floor is done, we're probably going to get it to a running state. Radiator showed up, all that, and then we'll focus on some more bodywork stuff. And until next time, thanks for tuning in. Adios, brochachos. Breakout banditos. I think you guys are going to be breakout banditos. Breakout bandits? I feel like I need to come up with something creative to call the people that tune in because everyone weird does that, and I am very weird. I'll go with Breakout Bandits. Thanks for tuning in, Breakout Bandits. Till next time on Bullwinkle and the Squirrel. See ya.